Failure, it is a thing, not a person. It is what happened to you. It is not you. Don't internalize it. And it's easy to say, it's easy to go, okay, thanks, Jim. I get it. That's great advice. I'll take that. No, you actually have to take it, take it right now. Because think about that failure that happened yesterday or last week or last month or last year. You have to understand that failure is data. Failure is information. And if you want to benefit from it, which you can, you have to do the productive pause. How does that make you better?
I am Damon Lemby, and welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for leaders who know that lifelong learning can be your ultimate advantage. Joining me in a moment is Jim Harshaw Jr. Now, Jim was a Division I All-American wrestler. Then he went on to become the youngest coach in the country as a Division I coach. Now he's an executive performance coach. He's a TEDx speaker, and he's the host of a great podcast called Success for the Athletic-Minded Man. In our conversation, Jim really opens up about his first startup and then it all shut down and what that failure taught him about mindset and identity. He's also going to walk us through a deep dive of his framework that really helps leaders align vision, goals, environment, and what I think is most important, follow through. We also talk about imposter syndrome, which we've all been through, and Jim has some great advice on how we could work our way through it. And a surprising daily habit that Jim works with all his clients, from CEOs to world-class athletes, that's been a game changer for them and can be for you as well. So Jim, what is it about failure that keeps so many people afraid to chase their dreams?
Yeah, failure is this funny thing that, when we talk on a podcast or we want to post on social media or we talk to our kids about failure, hey, failure is okay and failure's a learning process. Like, we all know the quotes and the cliches, but when it comes to actually living it's hard to actually live out those things that we share with our kids and our colleagues and coworkers and all that, and the stuff that we see on social media. It's almost like, it's okay for other people to fail. You're going to learn from failure. You're going to be okay. You failed at that thing, and hey, just make it into it's a learning lesson. There's no such thing as losing. It's only winning or learning, all of that. But when it happens to me, when it happens to us,
different story.
It's different, right?
Yeah.
We use different language in our own heads to ourselves. See, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not capable enough. You shouldn't have tried that. That was a waste of your time. Try something different. Lower your goals. Settle for less. All of that, sort of those words and that sort of feeling settles in on us whenever we fail. But we have to, we have to be aware. We have to be cognizant. We have to be understanding of what actually is happening. Listen, I gave a TEDx talk titled "Why I Teach My Children to Fail," and I still struggle with this. And I talk about this. People hire me to speak about it, but I'm not immune to the negative effects of failure. I have to recognize things. So here's a perfect example. 15 years ago now, I had a startup, raised angel capital and built a technology company, built a software. And about 2 years into it, I had revenue, I had customers, but not enough to keep the lights on. So I ended up having to shut that down. Ever since then, I thought to myself, boy, I'm not good at creating technology. I shouldn't have, built a startup around technology and software as a service. It's just not my thing. I'm not any good at it. I didn't even know what a wireframe was when I first started that company. And for years, that is what I lived by. That thought of, I'm just not good at that. So therefore don't, pivot, go some other direction, as opposed to the truth, which is you are now far more qualified than, anybody, most kids coming out of college with a degree in computer science around that specific thing that you failed at. You're actually qualified at this. You have street cred at this now. And here I am 15 years later, I'm actually developing a software for my clients to help them, set, track, and achieve their goals. Now it's just about done. And it was so much easier, not despite that failure, but because of that failure. So, this is something that we all have to realize. And you, the listener, you have failed at things before. And even though you've probably said or read the cliches on social media or said those things to your kids, you have to realize, how is failure actually impacting me? You have to actually stop and think about, how is it actually impacting me? What am I scared of? Where are my fears and hesitations because of prior failures?
And it's interesting. You sold a business successful, then you just had that failure that you just shared, and you beat yourself up over it. But prior to that, you had some failures with your wrestling career, but you were able to work through that and learn from failure.
Yeah. And really that's a lot of what I talk about in my TEDx talk, which is, my wrestling journey, which was as an athlete. I was a high school athlete, got to college, Division I athlete on a wrestling program. And I got there and I realized, my goal is to be an All-American. All-American wrestler means top 8 in the country. If you finish top 8 on the podium at the NCAA championships, that is an All-American in wrestling. To become an All-American, you have to qualify first for the national championships. Then you have to win at least 4 matches to get onto the podium. And my freshman year, I qualified for the national championships, but I failed. Sophomore year, qualified again for the national championships, but again, I fell short. Junior year was pretty much a repeat of the prior 2 years, qualified for the national championships, but I failed and found myself in the locker room, my face buried in a towel in tears, wondering why I can't do this. Like, what is wrong with me? I can't work any harder. I can't run more miles or lift more weights or watch more film. There's just not enough hours in the day. Like, what else can I do? And I thought that, maybe it's just not in the cards for me. Maybe I just need to let go of this goal. And, but I had one more year. I had one more shot. And my senior year, I again qualify for the national championships, and I win my first 3 matches. And I've got to win one more match in order to become an All-American. I got to wrestle the 4th ranked guy in the country on the number 1 ranked team in the country, University of Minnesota. And there's 15,000 people in the arena. And I've got 7 minutes to either achieve a lifelong goal or to go home and, not having achieved ever any of my wrestling goals in my career, 17 years of wrestling. And I went out and I won.
But what was it like going into that match? It's different. I played baseball, 15, 20,000 people at the state of Omaha, whatever, but there's 9 guys on the field with me. You just went in against this guy, and I believe this was the first time you ever wrestled against somebody who was in the top 5.
Yeah, first time, wrestling somebody in the top 5. Actually, I'd wrestled a couple guys in the top 5, but I'd never beaten anybody ranked in the top 5. So how was it stepping on? And this is really important for the listener to get. So the question is, how was it stepping into that match, stepping on the line, 7 minutes, 17 years of competitive, of blood, sweat, and tears on the line in the next 7 minutes? And how do you perform fearlessly? How do you step up, whether it's stepping in front of an audience to give a speech, whether you're a big sales pitch, a big job interview, a tough conversation with your boss? Like, everybody has that moment in their lives. So I'm going to back up to at the end of my junior year. I said, my face buried in a towel in tears, wondering why I can't do this. I had dedicated my life in that off season to figuring out what is it that I'm missing. Like, I've been doing this for 16 years now at this point. What is it that Jim is missing? Like, do I need to do more squats, get stronger legs, right? Do I got to increase my cardio? Do I got to learn some new techniques that I'm just missing? Like what is it? I got to dial in my nutrition better. Like, what is it, the thing that I'm missing? So I trained all summer, competed and trained everywhere I could possibly find a wrestling mat to get on. I worked wrestling camps, these college wrestling camps all over the country, just so that I could be on the mats with different wrestlers. In these wrestling camps, they bring in, Olympic champions and national champions to be the instructors. And I just wanted to be around these guys and learn and pick their brain. Well, all summer I spend dedicate my entire off season to this. Next season, my senior season rolls around. It's the night before the opening tournament. We're in Morgantown, West Virginia at the West Virginia University Mountaineer Open. I'm sitting at the edge of my hotel bed, and it hits me. I'm like, I never figured it out. I never figured out what that thing is that I'm missing. In that moment, I thought, I give up. I give up on the outcome. If I get on the podium at the end of the season, great. If I don't, I have to be okay. I don't have any other choice but being okay with that, because I know in my heart of hearts that I put everything into this. I put everything into this, and I can go, I can approach this with no regrets. And I wake up the next day, I went 5-0 on the day, dominated the competition. My dad asked me, I don't know what got into you, but that's a different Jim that I've ever seen compete before. And the difference was I competed with freedom. I didn't focus on the outcome. I focused on the process, and I let go of the outcome. I mean, Stephen Covey told us this in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, start with the end in mind, but also focus on the process, not the outcome. I had so much fun that day competing, and I just carried that attitude with me the rest of my whole senior season, until I get to that match against the wrestler from Minnesota, ranked fourth in the country, 15,000 people. And you ask, what was it like going into that match? And I mean, Damon, I wanted to win so badly, but I had to put that aside. I had to trick myself, get outside of my head and say, listen, Jim, you don't want to win. You want to go compete. Like, you are here to compete at your best. And if your best gets your hand raised at the end, great. If it doesn't, again, you have no choice but to be okay with that. So go out, have fun, be yourself, and compete like the outcome doesn't matter. And that's what I did. I went out and I dominated the match. I got a takedown within the first 10 seconds, went out of bounds, bad call by the ref. I mean, I'll still say it to this day. It was a bad call by the, I didn't get the takedown, didn't get the points. And I had to just let it go. Like, so for the listener, like, you go into that sales pitch, you go have that tough conversation with your board, your investors, your boss, whoever it might be, and something unfair is thrown in your way. Like, how are you going to respond? It doesn't matter. Like, that doesn't matter. That is just part of the process for you. And that's how I attacked that entire senior year. I had more fun competing than I'd ever had. And I won more matches. I went 40-8 that season, dominated throughout the year and had so much fun in that match. And I won. And so that is, I thought I had discovered some sort of secret to performance, but really this is performance psychology 101. And for everybody listening, if you think you don't have a mindset challenge or issue, you can be better if you study mindset, if you study performance, because we look at the Tom Brady's and LeBron Jameses of the world. Well, guess what? They're studying this stuff too. You go, well, they don't have a performance problem. Well, they know they can always be better. And the only thing holding them back is between their ears. And that was the case for me as well.
I mean, starting at the end, that I always call it the $1 million body and 10-cent head. In baseball, and I'm sure you experienced it too, I played with some guys who had unbelievable talent and they never made it, right? They got into the minor leagues. They hit 500-foot home runs in batting practice. Somebody throws them a curveball in the dirt. They chase it. They're done, right? And then you get the others who really focus on the mindset, the vision work, or whatever it is that they do. It's so important and it's so true. And it's the same for the business world. You know, my story is almost the same as yours, but in a much longer sense. I always talk about overcoming imposter syndrome. And my fourth and final step is when you step into the batter's box or you step on stage, you learn and let go. Stop thinking about technique. You know, you're here, you know, you put in the work, you put in the practice. You either going to knock it out of the park or maybe you're going to fail. But regardless, it's going to be a learning opportunity. And Jim, quite frankly, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for trying things, because so many people are afraid. Like my first question, we're afraid to try. And, you know, you pass up these opportunities and guys like me and you, it's like, hey, let's just go for it, make it happen.
Yeah. I remember a conversation I had with a world champion wrestler on my podcast where he said, my breakthrough moment is when I realized that failure actually is an option. And I was like, oh man, it's like, what an aha moment. Like, failure is an option in everything that we do. All we can do is our best. And that's okay. And if we're afraid to fail, or if we're afraid to lose, or if we're afraid to take that risk, then you're going to be comfortable. But we all know that being comfortable is very uncomfortable. And if you want more, if you know that there's more in the tank, you have more potential, then you know, you have to start examining your own mindset. I mean, in baseball, my goodness, you know, if your batting average is 300 or higher, like you're an all-star, you're one of the best, you know,
One of the best,
and so failure is just built into the sport, into the experience. And if you step up to that plate with fear, uncertainty, doubt, remembering all of your prior failures, you're going to be riding the pine pretty quick.
No, absolutely. And I like what you talk about how failure is actually part of success. It's not the opposite of success. You know, so when you finished your career, you then went on to be a coach. And at one point, you're even one of the youngest coaches in D1 at the time. Did you deal with any imposter syndrome yourself? Like, am I ready or not to be in this role?
100%. Imposter syndrome. You know, I was the youngest Division I head wrestling coach in the country, and I always just tell people that just simply means I was the most least qualified coach in the country. And there was self-doubt, there was imposter syndrome. I still have it now. And interestingly, I talked to a friend of mine who is a performance coach for elite performers, both corporate and in sports. I asked him, I said, is imposter syndrome common in high achievers? Because I suspected it was. They said, absolutely. It just, there's this constant need to prove yourself, prove your worth, prove your value. You achieve one thing and that's not enough. So you set your goal higher, and it looks like drive on the outside, and it is, and it's fun and exciting. It keeps life exciting. There's always something to chase after, but it's a blessing and a curse, right? It can always leave you feeling like I'm not enough. I give a sermon at my church actually on this over the weekend. I talked about this idea of letting go, and this idea of imposter syndrome. And I absolutely had that. I mean, I had that when I was wrestling, and actually a big key to my performance my senior year, I started working with a mindset coach who helped me have these epiphanies and have these aha moments and stay in the mindset of I am enough. When you think like a world-class performer, imposter syndrome becomes irrelevant. It's in part because imposter syndrome is, am I enough? Am I going to live up to whatever other people think I am? And when you can put that aside and just show up as you, just the best version of you, then imposter syndrome just dissolves and becomes irrelevant, and you just show up and do your best.
And that's all you can do. And I really like what you're just talking about, learning to let go. And I think when we do learn to let go, again, for me in baseball, it took me a couple of years to get it almost to the point where my career, this is like the last chance I had. So what do I have to lose anymore? I'm not going to worry about disappointing my dad, which was important to me, or being a fool. And you just learn so much about that, right? And we're gonna get onto that. But I got a question for you. What would your players on your team say that you were like as a coach? What was your coaching style from their perspective?
Man. Interestingly, so it would be much different then as it is now. So here's a huge mistake that I made early on in my career. Took over the program, Slippery Rock University, Division I wrestling program, Division II athletic department, opted up to Division I. A lot of the small schools in Pennsylvania opt up to Division I because wrestling is so good and so deep in that area of the country. And, Slippery Rock has had world champions and done very well at NCAAs over the years. And so I step into this program that is not a top 25 program at the time and just not ranked and just a kind of a struggling program. And I said, if you're not here to be a national champion, you shouldn't be in this room, in this practice room. And it's like that's not really, I hadn't really processed what I learned just a couple of years earlier as an athlete, or 3 years earlier as an athlete, of was just about performing to be your best. And whatever, some of these guys, their best is never going to be a national. It's just not going to be a national champion. Sure, I want you to train like a national champion, but your best is going to be whatever it is. And, if you don't, wrestling's a sport where, you really need a long time on that, like just time on the mats. Like you can't learn to wrestle in a year. Like it's like baseball. You just need time on the field. There's just so much that goes into it, and muscle memory and the IQ that comes with it. And so they would have said, I set a very high bar, probably unrealistically high bar and high standard. Was probably insecure in my imposter syndrome. So anytime I got pushed back, I was pretty staunch and I pushed back really hard, as opposed to how I would lead now, which is much more understanding. And I'll credit certainly maturity, but also my wife. She's a licensed therapist. And my goodness, thank goodness for her and my parenting. Otherwise, my kids would be all a disaster, but I would be a much softer approach now. Certainly high bar, high expectations, but also love would be a big part of that. As a matter of fact, this came up in my conversation with Doug Conant, former CEO of Campbell Soup, who you introduced me to, and about sort of setting the bar high, setting the standard high, but leading with love. And I probably missed the leading with love part back then.
Can you be a little bit more specific? What do you mean about leading with love?
Thinking about where your heart is in a conversation. Do I really want this for that person because I love them and I want to serve them and I want to care for them and lift them up? Or do I want this because I want to win? I want the program to be successful. That's the difference between a transactional leader and a transformational leader. Nick Saban went on a rant about this on College Game Day. I think it was last season, and I actually just watched this again yesterday because I saw this a bunch of ways. It kind of went viral whenever he's talked about this last season. But he talked about when he was coaching it, I think it was at Michigan State maybe, and he was like, we were losing and we had a terrible record and we were going to go out and play somebody who was going to probably beat the pants off of us. And he goes, that's the moment I became a transformational leader about caring for them, loving them, as opposed to a transactional leader. We've got to win. I've got to look good. We've got to look good. I've got to keep my job. All of those sort of external things, as opposed to loving the people. And so that's what that looks like, right? And if you go into any conversation, whether it's a colleague, a direct report, an investor, your kids, if you come from a loving place, you can have those hard conversations much more easily. And they feel that too.
Totally. I mean, what you're saying, I had Gary Ridge on my show. It was awesome. The chairman of WD-40. And he talked about being a people first leader, putting about your people first, it's not about you all the time, as a leader, right? I mean, give your team credit, have their back, actually really care about them. And that's a great way to create a culture. We're going to get into it in a second about how you help your customers now, but thinking back to your coaching days or, your software company or anything, do you have any stories of when you helped bring out greatness in somebody you've worked with, which maybe they didn't even see themselves?
There was one particular wrestler who I just loved coaching this guy. And he started with the raw materials of work ethic and positive attitude. And you can take a person like that to the moon, And he was a college wrestler for me named Jason Cardillo. And I got to send this podcast to him and let him know I'm talking about him. And he was a guy who was just willing to put in the work, is so coachable and so much fun to work with. And he started beating top 20 ranked guys in the country when he wasn't. He believed before he could see it, the proof and the results. He started believing and he put in the work and put in the effort and believed, and he trusted me. And I started imparting some of this mindset and fear-based uncertainty, sort of self-doubt stuff. I started helping him see through that same stuff in himself. And it really unlocked him, and he became a national qualifier and beat nationally ranked guys. It was really cool to watch him. And then I coached a couple of guys. I don't do really mindset coaching for high school and college athletes, but I've done it in a couple of instances over the years. I've just taken on a couple of clients that way. And actually both of them were college wrestlers who went from not being an All-American to the year after I coached them to being an All-American. And it was really cool to watch that, and just sharing my experience and how they need to approach their performance with all the stuff that we've been talking about. And that's always been really fun and rewarding, watching people get out of their own way mentally, psychologically. And then, so I've seen that, I've done that and seen that in sports, but and then also in business. Like I have so many guys who, there's a guy named Rich in particular who, this guy was a high performer. He was a 4-time NCAA Division I All-American golfer, golfed on the Pro Tour for years. So a high performer understands mental performance and how to get the best out of himself. And then in business, he came to me very successful, but he knew that he was just leaving too much on the table, was getting in his own head and getting in his own way. And through my coaching program, we unlocked him. Now he owns multiple businesses. He's absolutely crushing it. 4 months into the program, he told me, he's like, Jim, I've already achieved all of the financial goals that I set in the initial program. Now I need to set even bigger ones. And then he has since broken those ones and has set even bigger, scarier financial goals for himself. His growth has been absolutely exponential.
One of the things, for our listeners who are new and emerging leaders or leaders at any level that you said that I'm with you 100% is a gentleman you brought up who had the raw talent and maybe the attitude, I think you said. I am a big believer, always hire for attitude and aptitude over experience whenever possible, right? I want somebody who will come in, who's hungry, who's ready to learn. They're not afraid to make mistakes. They're coachable. Also, what you brought up is like even the most high performers in the world have coaches. They invest in themselves, whether it was Kobe Bryant or some of the top business leaders. Take us through, how you work with your customers.
To address your first point there, like, hey, you're not going to read on a resume if they're, if they have the work ethic, the attitude, all of that's like, that's why you got to do, assessments, and go far beyond just the piece of paper in front of you, that resume, even the references and stuff like that. You've got to go beyond that and really just try and get inside of their head and figure out how are they going to perform on my team. And that's something that I've done with clients that work with me. Is if they're hiring, we will do assessments on people they're looking to hire. They'll get down to their top 3 candidates, and then we do an assessment, and we can say, okay, well, this is what this person is going to be like, and this is what this person is going to be like, et cetera, and let them know, like, what is this? How is this person wired? Are they wired well for this role that you expect them to be in? Are they going to cover a blind spot in your team? Not just like skill set wise, but actually how they show up for the team. So anyway, really, really critical to get that right, because making a bad hire costs you a lot of money. And then in terms of your question, how do I work with clients? It's a framework that I really uncovered after that business failure. So I talked about, I failed at this business, and I got to this point where I thought to myself, I've got a lot of work ethic and experience and knowledge and wisdom and ability, but how do I actually bring this to the world in a way that, is actually going to help me, really maximize my potential? And I thought to myself, well, I felt this way once before. And when I showed up in college at the University of Virginia, I was a recruited walk-on. I was not a scholarship athlete. Nobody in my family had ever graduated from college before. So when I showed up, there was a lot of, I had the work ethic, I had the attitude, I had the experience, but I just hadn't been able to put it together in a way to really maximize my potential. Never achieved any of my goals in high school. My goal is to be a state champion. Not only did I not win the state championship, I never even got onto the podium. Academically, I was a good student, but I couldn't have gotten into a University of Virginia on my own without wrestling. And so academically at UVA, I felt in over my head. Athletically, I was in over my head. I was on a top 10 recruiting class. I was a nobody on that class. I was just a guy. And even really socially, Damon, like, I was a blue collar kid. Dad was a construction worker. Mom was a secretary. So fitting in a white collar kind of school, am I going to fit in here? And end of that 5 years, I ended up graduating with a master's degree and undergraduate degree. So I got 2 degrees, first person in my family to get a college degree, win 3 ACC championships, get on the podium as All-American, invited to live and train at the Olympic Training Center. And so I, just absolutely transformational experience. So fast forward, and I'm at this point where, I had this business failure, and I'm thinking, okay, what's next for me? How do I maximize my potential? I thought, well, I had a framework in place that I had went from good to great. And when I was an athlete, can I put this back in place in my life now? And will it work? And I realized there were 4 things that were part of this infrastructure that you experienced, that I experienced as a college athlete. For any listeners, if you were an athlete, high school, college, you get this. Or even there are other areas where you might have experienced this. In the military, certainly folks experience this framework in the military, or playing an instrument. Anything you've really had to commit to be great at something, there's an infrastructure there. And so the 4 parts of the infrastructure, this is the backbone of my coaching program, are this. Number 1 is, when you're an athlete, you have a very clear vision for what success looks like, right? It's black and white. It's binary. You either make the starting lineup or you don't. You win the game or you don't. You advance in the postseason or you don't. Like, you have to be very clear on what that looks like for you in your business, in your life. What is that compelling vision that once you have that, it will unlock all of the things, all the latent ability, drive, work ethic, experience, knowledge, wisdom, all of that. Once you have that clear vision, you can bring all of that to the table towards that compelling vision. Until then, if you don't have that exciting, clear, compelling vision, you are going to dabble, you are going to be inconsistent, find yourself with a lack of consistency, lack of focus, easily distracted. So step one, what is that clear vision? And that's what we help our clients do. Get really clear on that vision. And really, what are the underlying core values that drive you?
And one thing I want to point out, Jim, in sports, it's relatively easy because it's like right in front of you. When I got out of sports into the business world, it was kind of unclear. I mean, you could be kind of lost without that.
And most people are, right? For anybody who's listening who was an athlete or just really, we have that clear vision earlier in our lives, right? Graduate from high school, go to college. Graduate from college, get our first job. Get our first job, maybe go back for an MBA or grad school or get that next job, or get married, get the house, get the kids, get the car. There's all these check boxes, and then you get to a certain point where you're like, wait a second, the map is blank at this point, And this could be where the midlife crisis shows up, or this can just be where you're like, I thought there would be more. I thought I would be happier once I got to this point. Like, what am I leaving on the table? What's next for me? How do I, really maximize my potential? Well, first of all, let's get clear on what that actually even looks like. Because once you do, you had that in baseball, which is why you were able to do really hard things, right? Go compete in a game or a series over the weekend, come back a late Sunday night. You got a test on Monday morning at 8 a.m. and you have to show up for class. Meanwhile, students who weren't student athletes struggle just to show up for that class. But meanwhile, you competed all weekend in baseball games, halfway across the country. Same thing for wrestling. We played through injury and you show up early, stay late, do all those things. And you can do that whenever you have that clear, compelling, exciting vision. It is like a magnet. It pulls you towards it.
And it has to be your vision, right? I mean, luckily we didn't grow up in the Instagram days, right? I find too many people that you didn't coach. They're so worried about comparing themselves to other people, what kind of car that they drive. I mean, I just want to hammer that home. It's got to be what's important to you.
You're exactly right, Damon. A lot of guys men and women are aligning their goals with what's based on what's parked in their neighbor's driveway or what they see on social media or what the mass media is telling them or what their mom and dad want, right? What has been instilled with them as opposed to their own vision for themselves. And that's when we really start making progress. So that's step one. And then step two is now creating goals, very specific, clear goals that align with that vision, that are tethered to those values that will get you there. As an athlete, you have that, right? You have that clear vision for what success looks like, standing on top of the podium, winning the game, winning the starting lineup, whatever it might be. And if we have that now, once we create, that vision, well, okay, what are the goals that are going to get there? Well, I got to, increase my strength. I got to get my 40 speed down to this time. I got to get to this weight or whatever. Now we have these goals that are they just nestle very neatly underneath that vision. Out here, we don't have that. So we got to create that vision. Now we got to create very clearly defined goals that align with that vision and what I call micro goals. What are the sub steps? These are monthly goals, that are going to get me there. So for example, when you're an athlete, you're watching film, you are making course corrections. You have somebody saying, hey, Damon, you got to position yourself a little bit differently on the field in this scenario. For myself, it's well, Jim, you're out of position whenever you make a leg attack. You've got to get your head up and your elbows in, whatever it might be. We have that and we're tracking that and measuring that. You've never competed in there's never a baseball game, Damon, where you didn't know the score, right? Or a season that you went through that you didn't have a win-loss record. We know that. We have to have the same things now. We have to track these goals and these micro goals and what are the metrics? Am I hitting them? Am I not hitting them? Scoring yourself. It's an infrastructure that's there by default as an athlete. It is not there by default in the real world. So step one, vision and values. Step two, aligned goals.
And then before we go on to step three, you talk about it's no longer a single focus, right? It's no longer just winning or whatever. I mean, I think you break it down into 4 different areas.
As athletes, I don't know about you, but I was pretty single-minded focused, right? I did well academically, but really it's wrestling and then everything else is just secondary.
That was the same thing. I don't know if I did too well academically until later on in my life, but yeah.
It's that's just the focus at that point. You can get away with that at that point in your life. Now, we're both married, kids, and community commitments, family commitments. There's just so much more, and we have to pay attention to our own health and fitness and all these things. So we really make sure that our clients are not single-minded focused, because there's no joy in having a great, successful business, making a ton of money while your relationships are in shambles, right? Or your health is a mess. And so we really approach this in a holistic way, right? We're setting the goals in your career and your business, but also setting those other goals. So 4 areas. Number 1 is relationships. Number 2 is self. Number 3 is health. And then 4 is wealth or work, right? So relationships, self, health, and wealth. And I think they're all self-explanatory except for maybe self. Self goals we define as growth goals, or impact in the world, like volunteering, philanthropy, or just fun, like things that are actually just fun for you. Like, I'm an outdoors guy. I love you. I grew up hiking and hunting and fishing and rock climbing and mountain biking and whitewater kayaking, all of that. Like, I have to build that into my life. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen. And I find so much joy in that stuff, but it gets cut out because of all the other things that crowd it out. So being very intentional about, relationships, date nights or time with the kids or connecting with family, connecting with friends or God. This is where faith fits in for a lot of folks. So relationships, self, health, and wealth are those 4 areas. It's a dashboard. We have a software that's just about, as of recording this, it's just about ready. It's just about done. We're going to be launching this for our clients. It's a tool that will help them set, track, and achieve their goals. It will be an app on their phone as well. So you have to have that tool in place to really track these things and make sure I'm on track long term.
Is there one of those 4 that you see most of your customers struggle with more than others?
Yeah, relationships. Most of my clients are athletic men, right? Men who were athletes at some point in their lives. So they are very driven, highly successful, high achievers by the world standards, tend to be fit. They're getting their workouts in. And a lot of times it can be at the expense of what's really important, the most important thing in our lives, which is the relationships. And so, they have to be really intentional about putting their phone down when they get home, really being like present when they're with their family, as opposed to like in the room, but thinking about work and really sacrificing that area. So relationships is, it's different for everybody, but I would say if there's one common theme, it's that.
And it's hard, but what you're saying is so important, being intentional and being present. I'm a dad. I got 2 little kids, and sometimes you get all these things going through your mind around business and everything. And I always just want to bring it back to like, Wally's not going to be 4 forever. No matter how busy our work, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. If we don't have the health, I've seen plenty of individuals super wealthy who have terrible relationships with their kids, who die young because they don't take care of themselves. So I really like what you're talking about around make it holistic for all 4 of those. So let's move on to step 3.
Yeah. So step 3 now is the environment of excellence. When you're an athlete, you have a coach, and a coach will call you out if you need called out, help you course correct if that's what you need, maybe give you a kick in the ass if you need that. I use the analogy, we're on the inside of the jar trying to read the label. We need somebody who's outside the jar who can see the things that we can't see, who can call us out when we need called out. All of us need that. Not some of us, not most of us, everyone. That is why, to go back to the Tom Brady's and the LeBron Jameses of the world, that's why they actually have coaches also. It's not like, hey, I don't need a coach. Nobody else needs to ever tell me what to do ever again because I'm the greatest in the world at what I do. Well, guess what? They still have people on the outside of the jar helping them read the label that they can't see. So the environment of excellence is that. And then also it's, again, going back to the athletic analogy or metaphor here is we had teammates. Like when you're on a team of like-minded people, the bar is just higher. Like there's just people around you doing hard things. Listen, wrestling is an absurdly hard sport. I lost 22 pounds in 2.5 days once to make weight.
I like that story.
It was pain and suffering, and I probably should have been hospitalized. When I stepped on the scale. But you're just around other people who do this, and you really don't know any better. You do know better, but it's just like this is just the standard. Like when I trained at the Olympic Training Center, you're just around other world-class performers and you go, oh, like that's the way we do this. That's the way we warm up. That's the way we train. That's the way we talk to our teammates. That's the way we, put food on our tray in the dining hall, right? That's how this works. And so we have to have that environment. And if you're around just average people, you will get the same result. They will pull you towards the mean, pull you towards the average. And so, a big part of my coaching is we have a community of over 80 people who are high performers, like really world class at what they do. And that just rubs off on everybody else. They're sharing insights, sharing ideas. They're setting the bar in terms of, business, but also health and fitness and being great fathers and great husbands. And that's just the environment that we've created. And the bar goes up for everybody in every area of their life. So that is the environment of excellence. And that's the third step.
So one question, I'm going to give you a little pushback, but I'm sure you can clarify when it comes to like-minded people. When you're referring to like-minded people, being a great dad and all this kind of stuff, the downside of that, if everybody you're talking to or surrounding yourself with thinks and acts the same exact way that you do.
If it's negative, then that's not the right group to be in, right? If you're around a bunch of people who think the way you do, and you're like, man, I'm not very good at my nutrition, and I'm around a bunch of other people who eat a lot of junk food and don't pay attention to their nutrition, then yeah, you're going to default to whatever that average is, whatever that mean is. And so as long as the average in that network or that community is high, right? If the standard is high around, am I, sales calls, am I making my calls? Am I being disciplined? Am I staying focused? Am I getting my workouts in? Am I making sure that my, family is the first priority in my life? If you're around a bunch of people who think the same way, in that sense, you're in the right crowd.
Having accountability partners too, right? And having people who want to be great dads and great parents and great whatever is fantastic. But it's also nice to have people who think a little differently than you. They're still super positive. That's one of the things I struggled with early on. I wanted people who always agreed with me. Now I kind of like it where people give me pushback on my ideas. And that's what a coach is good for that, but also having a network where somebody is from a totally different culture or whatever, and they just look at things differently. I think that can help you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the great thing when you're around in a room of, like I'm just talking about my community here, this group of high performers, I mean, they're in all kinds of different walks of life. They're all over the United States. They're in different industries. They're all differently wired, right? And they have different life experiences. And they will call each other out. And we do have accountability partners. It's a big part of it. And you have to have that. And there has to be the ability for people to speak truth to each other. And that's what we have.
And so you have the vision, you have the goals that are aligned with the vision. You're now surrounding yourself with the right people. But where do you go from there? Because things don't always go linear all the time. And nothing's ever perfect.
If you get to that point and you go, man, this is great. I've got all these things dialed in that Jim said. If you stop there, you will have some success for a short amount of time, maybe weeks, maybe months, and then you will fall back to your old habits. You'll fall back to default, and you will find yourself being inconsistent, again, just easily distracted and off track of your goals. And as an athlete, again, we had this built in, but the fourth and final step was you have to have a long-term plan to follow through. There has to be a plan for follow through, even when things get hard, because they will. Even when you get blown off course, because you will. Even when the economy goes in the tank, or the kids get sick, or the car breaks down, or whatever, the holidays come, vacation, whatever it might be, you will, guaranteed, get blown off course. You will fall out of your habits, fall out of your routines, make mistakes, experience failures, guaranteed. So you have to have a plan to actually get back on track, actually follow through long term. And again, as an athlete, somebody else was setting the schedule. Somebody else told us when to show up to practice and when we were going to play the games or wrestle the matches. We always knew there was next season coming along. So you trained in the off season because there's, again, a plan to execute and follow through, and the vision and the goals are all kind of out in front of you. But if you stop with, setting the vision in the core values, the aligned goals, creating your environment of excellence, if you stop tracking this, having that built-in accountability over time, then you fall off. And our clients, I'm proud to say, we have clients who have been with us literally since the very first few months of starting my business, which was over a decade ago. We have guys who have been with me for 10 years. because we keep them on track. We keep them on the path. They have fallen off the path. We bring them back on the path. We help them course correct when they need to. And you, for the listener, myself included, we need this. We have to have this built in. Otherwise, we will fall back to our default. And you might be saying, well, Jim, my default is pretty high. That's awesome. Your performance in a framework and an infrastructure like this will go up from wherever you're at. It will go from there to higher. Going back to just kind of these names that we know, Tom Brady, LeBron James, like if they didn't have a coach, guess what? They'd be really, really good, but they wouldn't be as good as they are today. And that's really what we're talking about, is that delta between what's possible, where you're at and what's possible.
Yeah. And so, for somebody like me who sometimes struggles with consistency, do you have one or two hacks or tricks or tips that people can get themselves back on track or keep them on track?
I'm going to frame this all based upon one concept that I teach that is really the underlying secret to all success. If there's a secret to success, this is it. And nobody's talking about this. It is this concept that I've discovered. I've published over 500 episodes of my podcast, and where I've interviewed world-class performers, Navy SEALs and New York Times best-selling authors and on, right? Olympic gold medalists. And I always ask some version of the question, what is one habit that you most credit for your success? And for the Olympic gold medalist, you think it would be some kind of training habit. For the New York Times best-selling author, you think it would be some kind of writing habit, but it never is. It is always some version of hitting the pause button. And they might say, Jim, at the beginning of every day, before I open my computer, I write down the 3 things that I got to do to win the day today, right? It's a pause, asking a question, gaining clarity before they engage, right? Or they might say, I work with a coach, right? I work with a mindset coach or a performance coach or a business coach or whatever it might be. They might say a journal, like journaling is another example of this, doing an annual retreat. These are all versions from the 3-minute sort of morning pause to the maybe 3-day annual retreat. These are all versions of a pause. And so I've coined the term productive pause. And the productive pause is this. The definition is a short period of focused reflection around specific questions that leads to clarity of action and peace of mind. Clarity of action, peace of mind. That is what we all want. We want a clear plan of action and the peace of mind that we know we're doing the right work. And that doesn't happen by showing up today and doing the same thing today because that's what I did yesterday. And then showing up tomorrow and doing the same thing tomorrow as I did today, just because that's what I did the day before, right? Hitting the pause button, gaining clarity, asking the hard questions, and then engaging. One of my clients, he's like, Jim, I need you to extract me from the matrix so that I can gain clarity and re-engage. He's a very high performer, very successful, sold multiple businesses, starting a new business. He just knows he needs me to grab him by the collar, yank him out of the rat race and the chaos of life, and ask him the hard questions, get clear on his new micro goals, and then re-engage. And so that is the hack, right? That is the tip, is build into your calendar. Here's one thing you can do. It's very specific. Set a reminder for the first Monday of the month for the rest of your life, right? Put it on your calendar for 8 a.m. on Monday morning, the first Monday of the month, and have a link to wherever your goals or journal or however you want to do it, wherever you're tracking your progress, have a link to that Google Doc or Word doc or whatever it might be. Have it there so you can just click on it, open it, and then engage in score yourself, do that self-productive pause. It's very hard to do this by yourself. That's why you really need a coach to help you with this, to really ask the hard questions, not to let you kind of slide. And so that's the one hack. I would say if you do nothing else, build in a 15 to 20 minute productive pause once a month where you just look at your goals. And if you say, Jim, I don't have time, I'm too busy, this will help you be more effective and more efficient and get more things done than not doing it, right? You will gain more time by doing this.
It's almost counterintuitive because you think some people would say, just work harder. And you're actually saying, no, go slow to go fast sometimes, I think a lot of times people struggle with thinking. Thinking is hard. Do you have a practice that you do when it comes to just taking the time to think?
Yeah. So Henry Ford has a great quote. Thinking is the hardest thing that we can do, which is why most people never actually do it. And it's true. What do? We sit down on our computer, we start checking email, we respond and react all day long. as opposed to stopping and doing the thinking. And it's best done with somebody else. But the other way to do this is to have journal prompts. Like, ask yourself the hard questions. I have this whole document I keep of these, what I call bunker buster questions. So for example, one is a question I found from Tim Ferriss, and he got this from somebody else. The question is, if you could only work 2 hours per week, what would you do at that time? And it's just a hypothetical question. Like, if you really could only work 2 hours a week, what would you actually do? And then the question is, are you actually doing that stuff now? Because that's obviously the most important work that you could do. Another one is, how am I complicit in creating the conditions that I say that I don't want? That's Jerry from Jerry Colonna. How am I complicit in creating the conditions that I say that I don't want?
What's an example of what that could look like?
Creating the conditions that you say you don't want?
Yeah.
You could say, I'm so busy, I don't have time to do all the things that I want to do to,
I don't have time to read. I don't have
time to read. Exactly. All that stuff.
My book's called The Learn It All Leader. And it's not just about learning all the time. You got to do it too, right? But people are like, I don't know how you have all the time to learn, blah, blah, blah. Like 5 minutes later, I'll ask them, I said, you see any good shows on Netflix? And they'll rattle off like 10 shows that they're binge watching, right? So it's really comes down to, what are your priorities?
That's it. Like, that is how you are creating you're complicit in creating the conditions that you say that you don't want. Actually, I have a document that I'll share with you, Damon.
Okay. We could put it in the show notes.
It's a document that has a list of the top productive pause questions that you can just ask yourself. And that's an easy way to force yourself into doing the thinking. I also have an AI version. So you can go into my AI, coachjimai.com, and you can engage with the bot version of me and say, hey, Jim, ask me, this is what I'm struggling with. Ask me a hard productive pause question. And you can have that back and forth.
That's awesome. Hey, Jim, what is your ideal clients to work with? Give me an example of what that looks like.
Yeah. While I've worked with women in the past, we've really kind of narrowed our niche down to men primarily. It's a man in his 40s and 50s who has had a lot of success in his life, and maybe was an athlete at some point in his life, high school athlete, maybe a college athlete or a weekend warrior now, right? Likes to do 5Ks or marathons or Spartan races, whatever that might be. And they know that there's more in the tank. They're driven. They know there's another gear, but they feel pulled in a million different directions. They feel like they're leaving too much on the table, and they know there's more inside of them. That's my ideal client. And they are in control of their destiny, right? They are most likely not an employee. They may be, or maybe they're an employee who has a side hustle, but they're in some kind of role, sales role, leadership role, CEO, founder, entrepreneur. Their success, financially, personally, professionally, their success is dependent upon their performance.
And maybe there's somebody who wants to move into a leadership role or an entrepreneur. And one of the things I wanted to tell our audience before we wrap up here is, first of all, you have to check out Jim's podcast. I mean, he had Tim Ferriss on, for one. He's got a phenomenal guest. He's got, I think you have over 500 episodes?
Over 500, yeah.
And he introduced me to one of my idols. You can check out my episode with the Stephen Pressfield, which was awesome. He's been on Jim's show, I think, like 3 times. So many great things there. And one more question I have for you before we wrap up here is, and this goes back to, you got 4 kids, I got 2 kids. What is one piece of advice to help our kids understand what failure is?
It is a thing, not a person. It is what happened to you. It is not you. Don't internalize it. And it's easy to say, it's easy to go, okay, thanks, Jim. I get it. That's great advice. I'll take that. No, you actually have to take it. Take it right now. Because think about that failure that happened yesterday or last week or last month or last year that happened that you may actually kind of have forgotten about. And it's still, there's residue in there that is telling you, don't try again. Remember what happened last time. You have to understand that failure is data. Failure is information. And if you want to benefit from it, which you can, you have to do the productive pause. As athletes, we had a coach that helped us do that, right? You could watch film on your last at bat. Where did I make my mistakes? I could watch film on my wrestling. Hey, I made mistakes. Where can you improve? How does that make you better? You need to watch film in your life. Do the productive pause.
Another thing that us athletes are great at is receiving feedback. Do the productive pause and be open to receiving feedback. One piece of advice that I want to give to parents, because I actually experienced this the other day, a good buddy of mine, his kid didn't make the traveling baseball team. And guess whose fault it was? The coach.
Coaches, of course.
The coach's fault. I think you're setting your kids up for failure when you do that.
I've got a great story about this. This fires me up.
Fires me up. Let me just say that before you get started. It really fires me up. I just can't stand it.
There's a video that went viral a few years ago. It was the women's basketball coach at University of Louisville. And he was at a press conference after a game that he lost. He was blaming our culture and society of, everybody gets a trophy. And he was blaming. And I'm like, wait a second. And this went viral because everybody's like, yeah, this society, everybody gets a trophy. That's terrible. And we do this. And I'm like, wait a second. This coach is sitting here doing the exact same thing that he doesn't want his athletes to. He's blaming somebody else. Meanwhile, he lost to a team of the same aged women and the same recruiting database and the same recruiting pool that the other team had. He had access to them as well. So wait a second, let's look in the mirror and say, this team outperformed me. So should I blame society and somebody else externally, or should I look internally and take ownership of that? And I could go on about the whole everybody gets a trophy thing. I don't think that's the real problem in society. I think that is, again, blaming. I think we have to actually look at how we're parenting. And listen, I've run Spartan races and marathons and things like that. And I get a participation trophy every time I do it. It's not why I do it, right? Everybody gets a participation trophy because you get a paycheck. You don't get the bonus. You don't get the championship trophy unless you actually win the thing. And so I just think that's a whole other excuse that we're using in society. So
yeah, absolutely.
That's for another show.
For another show, blaming and victim mentality. It's all for another show. Yeah. Jim, this has been awesome. We talked about it a little bit, but where can our listeners connect with you at?
Yeah, JimHarshawJr.com. That's HARSHAW. If you search for my name, you'll find my website. You'll find my TEDx talk. You'll find my podcast. If you want to have a conversation, JimHarshawJr.com/apply. And you can apply for a free one-time one-on-one coaching call. We can chat about this framework and how this may or may not work in your life. It is truly not for everyone. And we do have a community. And so I got to make sure we're bringing in the right people. But I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody who's listening here and just to talk about how this may fit into your life. JimHarshawJr.com/apply. And I love to engage on social media. So I'll talk to everybody there too.
And, we went through Jim's framework, and I love how in Jim's solos, he always calls out the numbers of his episode. So I'm going to try to get this right. I think that your framework is starting at episode 439.
You nailed it. Yeah.
And by the way, if you enjoyed his framework, please watch my episode again, of course, but go through. He's got 5 episodes that walk you very detailed for what people pay for. You should hire them and pay them, but go through and listen to that first.
It's all there for free.
It's all there for free. So I want you to do that. That's one takeaway I want you to do. And the other thing I want you to do is start incorporating the productive pause. So do that. And until next time, everybody, I always like to say, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day. Thanks a lot, Jim.
If you look at the companies that have better extrinsic motivation, salary, health benefits, and so on, you don't see access alpha. So extrinsic motivation matters very little. Intrinsic motivation